Hello and welcome to Phoenix Talent Talks in partnership with the Business Post. The topic of this episode is Brexit and what Irish companies trading with Britain can do to prepare for it at this stage. I'm your host Elaine and I'm joined here today by David Harrington, a director at Phoenix specialising in accounting, finance and tax careers, Martin Agnew, a director at Across Borders Consulting, and Ciarán McConigley, also a director at Across Borders Consulting. Firstly, thank you all for taking part. So I'll start today with you, David. The deadline for the Brexit negotiations has been pushed back yet again. So now we're really down to the wire. What's your sense of how things may pan out at this stage?
Morning, Elaine. That's a good question to start with. At this point, I think it's very hard to know what will happen come the 1st of January. Both the EU and the UK seem quite steadfast in their positions at present. There was some positive news as we record this morning that Ursula von der Leyen said she does see a pathway to a deal, albeit it is quite a narrow one. I would say, given the deadlock in the negotiations over the last number of weeks, it seems unlikely that a comprehensive deal will be struck in the coming days. Again, Michel Barnier said that it may be a case that we have a short no-deal period coming into 1 January, even if a deal was struck over the next few days, which will cause a lot of issues for businesses from a customs and tariffs perspective. I suppose the positive that we should take from an Irish perspective at this stage is that the Northern Ireland issue seems to have been agreed upon and that both parties have stayed at the table for talks. I think in the long run, we will see a deal as it is in both parties' interest for that, particularly the UK, to have a free trade agreement.
And what's your take on how prepared Irish companies actually are now for Brexit? We've been dealing with a pandemic for the past 9 months. Has that had much of an effect?
Yeah, so in our line of work, we deal with companies across a variety of sectors. And what I would say in 2019, preparations were being made, or at least plans were being thought of. Definitely some businesses were working on the assumption that a deal would be done. COVID has obviously affected every business in the country, and for many businesses that we deal with, the aim was just to get through 2020, and 2021 kind of planning and thoughts have been put on the back burner. I do think a lot of businesses probably also assumed that the original deal negotiated last year would meant that there'd be no kind of customs and trade issues that Martin and Ciarán will discuss. But yeah, I think at this stage, many companies probably aren't prepared.
Okay, Martin, I'm going to bring you in here because I know that Across Borders Consulting specialises in customs and international trade advice. So you're working day in, day out with companies on the questions that they have about Brexit. Is there still time at this late stage to prepare?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think from our perspective, it's never too late to prepare. I'd echo certainly what David has just said. You know, there's been a very mixed level of preparation amongst companies. Some companies have taken a proactive approach to preparations for Brexit and the obvious customs and international trade impacts. But, you know, there's quite a significant underbelly, I think, that hasn't quite prepared for that yet. So that's sort of concern. But again, we have to, you know, it's really about getting that in place, getting those preparations in place. You know, it is the start of a new trading reality now. So essentially, deal or no deal, free trade agreement or no free trade agreement, the spectre of customs controls, customs declarations and supporting documentation is back. So that's something that, you know, businesses need to prepare for. But, you know, it's not insurmountable. There's some certain actions that businesses can take that we'll talk about that, again, you know, are important. So, what we would say to businesses that in order to be prepared for the customs implications, that, you know, these new customs controls as a consequence of Brexit, as a consequence of the UK leaving the European Union, it's important for them to sort of determine, you know, where they are responsible for customs formalities. So, you know, on the outside, looking at the sort of supplier-customer relationships and deciding where you will need to do clearance, where perhaps your supplier will need to do clearance. These things are absolutely imperative to look at. Again, it's absolutely critical to sort of think about some of the licenses that need to be in place just in order to, you know, to trade as an international company. So yeah, no, very much. I think from our perspective, there is still time to prepare, but, you know, we must prepare as quickly as possible. There is no time to sit and wait. It's imperative to get started now.
Ciarán, Martin mentioned there are some of the new customs procedures that are going to come into play and also licenses. Can you talk us through some of the basic steps companies in Ireland can take now to prepare for Brexit?
Yeah, sure thing, Elaine. And I suppose, like, as Martin was saying, it is never too late to prepare for the implications of Brexit. And I suppose where we are at the minute, like, you know, approaching the end of the year and the start of new trading reality, as Martin was saying, It really is about, at the minute, enabling supply chains for continuity of business from the 1st of January. So in terms of that, it's looking to ensure that where companies are responsible for import and export formalities, they have the applicable registrations in place. So the starting point there is that they have their EORI number. That is the basic kind of starting point for any company that needs to undertake import or export formalities. On top of that, then it's looking at the mechanics of customs clearance. So once a company is registered, do they have a method of submitting declarations, for example? Customs is a tax. A customs declaration is required for any import or export. It needs to be submitted to the authorities. So the first question then, once you've got your registration in place, is, well, how are we as a business going to submit those declarations to the authorities? For any imports where there will be applicable duties paid, the next question companies need to ask themselves is, how are we going to pay those duties? And again, there's different options available to businesses, but they need to decide what option fits their business model and makes sense for them. So, customs brokers can make payments of duties on behalf of businesses. They can outlay it and get reimbursement from traders. Companies have the ability to deposit cash on their C&E accounts, on their EORI number, that will be drawn down for imports. They can apply for deferred payment accounts that will defer payment of applicable import duties until the 15th day of the following month of import. And there's also new measures coming in from the government, such as postponed accounting for import VAT. So, really ensuring that companies are enabled to move products across the border from the 1st of January is critical. And that's the point that companies need to look at between now and the end of this year, if they haven't already done that. And then they'll be in a good position from, say, the 1st of January onwards to look at, well, what options do I have here to create efficiencies in my supply chain from a customs and international trade perspective? What special economic procedures are available that I can utilize to reduce my customs duty liability, should that be applicable, and to manage my cash flow obligations from a customs and trade perspective? Also ensuring that companies look at how are they going to meet their compliance obligations is important. So, ensuring their products have their tariff classifications assigned, they know their requirements from a customs valuation perspective and from an origin determination perspective, also extremely important. But definitely some of the kind of practical things companies can look at doing now that are trading with Great Britain for the 1st of January 2021.
So Martin, if I bring you back in there again, Ciarán mentioned the supply chain. So if we look at the wider supply chain, what can companies do now to optimise or Brexit-proof their supply chain?
There are a lot of things that companies can do and that they must start doing. So again, I suppose from the perspective, we've talked about a lot of the things that businesses would need to do to get ready here in terms of the information requirements. So customs, again, a new tax, a new way of dealing with trading relationships. A lot of companies in Ireland have not been trading internationally. Some have, of course, and they've got a natural advantage in that regard, but some haven't. So again, in terms of preparing, what is absolutely essential is that businesses who, especially have not been trading internationally, that they map their supply chain. So again, very simply put, they look at where they're sourcing goods from and where they're sending goods to in terms of customers and, in GB, of course. So again, that's very important. And again, also thinking about where, supply chains overlap across the GB land bridge. So again, once you do that, once you kind of map out those flows, then you're able to kind of think about what customs impacts there would be on top of that. So you're able to look at the border points, you're able to consider what controls might be in place by virtue of tariff classifications, for instance. So again, another critical data point for a business to think about. So business needs to obviously draw upon a lot of the information that has internally in terms of descriptions and come towards tariff classification codes. So that's a critical point. So all this kind of leads towards, a perspective of, in terms of immediate readiness, it's going to require businesses to kind of get this information out and be ready to submit it at the right time, at the time of import or the time of export. So that's a critical part. Looking slightly forward, there's a training piece to be done here. So again, we'd highly encourage businesses to, get familiar with the information firstly, but then to start thinking about, the new year, as Ciarán has pointed out, and some of the sort of things that would be important to look at in that regard.
So a lot of grants and other state supports have been introduced to help companies in Ireland prepare for Brexit. Ciarán, can you talk us through what's available?
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. So, as you said, there's a number of supports available from different bodies. So, for example, the starting point for a lot of companies will be their local enterprise office. And a lot of local enterprise offices offer Brexit mentoring, and there is training available through some of the local enterprise offices also. Enterprise Ireland have a number of grants that are available for businesses also in terms of upskilling staff, firstly. So there's a Brexit Ready grant to help companies to upskill staff or to hire new staff members. In addition to that, they have a Brexit support grant to assist companies to avail of outside consultancy support to put in place kind of, some plans and actions to enable their supply chains in the new trading reality from the 1st of January. Intertrade Ireland also has a Brexit planning voucher that's available to companies that allows them to look at their supply chains, as Martin was saying, and to look at the impact of Brexit from a customs and international trade perspective, and put in place plans to deal with those impacts. So there are a number of supports that are available. The government have put out a lot of good information. Also, the different departments have put out a lot of good information. So if you're trading agri-food products, for example, or live animals or plant products, the Department of Agriculture website has a very useful Brexit readiness kind of web page available. The Irish government, in addition, has a general Brexit readiness website also with a lot of information on the resources that are available, the funding that's available, and general information that's very useful for companies in terms of planning for the impacts of Brexit.
So a lot of useful help out there for companies that are facing into the new year, not entirely sure how Brexit is going to pan out at this stage. David, I just want to finish up with you today. In terms of talent and the Brexit relevant skills employers are looking for currently, what are you seeing at Phoenix?
Yeah, so this area is something that's going to see massive growth over the next 12 to 24 months. It's a very niche area, customs and international trade, and there's only a handful of experts really working in Ireland in this space. Guys coming from revenue and the global professional services space as well. But it's definitely an area where companies are looking for qualified professionals, and I also think it's an area where lots of tax consultants working in boutique, smaller firms are really going to have to upskill in the next 12 to 24 months.
So that's it for today's podcast. Thanks to our panel, David, Martin and Ciarán, for your very valuable advice and insights. And a big thank you as always to our listeners. We'll be back soon with the next instalment of Phoenix Talent Talks.